Why do we really watch television and scroll and seek stimulation? Well, part of the reason is because we are born into the sea of stimulation, aggravation, and information, and they need to keep stimulating us to keep us stuck in this cycles of thought, which keeps us thinking we're somebody doing something, which keeps us thinking we're in control, thinking we know, which keeps us caught in the illusion. And it keeps us at lower limiting perspectives and keeps us easier to control. This is how you suppress a population. You inundate them with toxic food and create a self-limiting population. Right? So that's part of the reason. We're born into a sea of stimulation, and that you have to keep the cycles of thought going. So we keep having this to create and inflate an ego self, a somebody self, so we're stuck in the cycles of suffering so they can control us and feed off of us. That's part of the reason. Another part of the reason, why do we seek stimulation in any form, is because we're out of balance. Right? We're out of balance. And what's funny is taking in too much stimulation can make us, because we were born in a sea of stimulation, aggravation, and information. Too much stimulation can aggravate us and cause us to seek more stimulation because it throws us out of balance even more, right? And anything, well, you could say, well, aren't these addictions? Yes, but why do we have addictions? We have addictions because we think we're somebody doing something, and we think we're in control. Remember, all of our suffering, hence out of balance, is because we think we're in control. There is no control. Control only exists in the thinking mind. When we stop thinking, we realize we are the observer. We are nature running off. We observe nature running off. So we get stressed. We get stressed about thinking we're going to have control over a decision when we don't make any decisions. There's nothing. We're not doing anything. We're just attached to the doer. We identify with the decision maker because we are thinking. Right? So we're stressed about, we get caught up in the past about decisions or things we've done in the past, how we've acted, how we spoke to someone in the past, thinking that we had an impact on that. We think we're guilty, we shame, regret, sin, all these things assume control, right? All of our suffering assumes control, because we think we're somebody doing something. So this is why we seek stimulation in part. So as far as addictions go, well, how do we have these addictions? Because we're out of balance. Well, how do we get back in balance? We have to remove the things that are causing us to be out of balance. This is mostly the sea of stimulation, aggravation, and information, right? There are no bad habits. So how do we correct bad habits or get back in balance? Well, there is no bad habits. There are merely things we do to cope with being out of balance, like seek stimulation, because we need that. We need, and also to suppress emotions. So how do we get back in balance? We have to remove the aggravators, remove the stimulation aggravation. We have to facilitate a state of peace and empty the mind. Because when we empty the mind, that will allow us to practice presence more, which is what brings everything back in balance. Presence and purification will bring everything back in balance, no matter what the issue is. This is so important. But we are not going to do presence and purification if we're caught in the sea of stimulation, because we can't be present. Right? So this is part of it. Well, getting back to what about addictions? Well, whether you want to call them addictions, bad habits, what have you, they will all fall off naturally as we practice presence and purification, as we give it all up, because that correct presence, surrender to God, corrects all imbalance issues. So it's just a lack of being out of balance, not bad habits, things we do to cope with being out of balance. We seek the TV, and also the television. What does it serve as? As we progress in our journey, many of us may have stopped watching television or stopped scrolling, for the most part, you could say, right? I don't really watch anything. Why? Because We realize it is stimulation. And what is the goal? How do we escape the illusion? We have to give it all up. We have to give up thinking we're somebody doing something. We have to give up thinking. And if you want to give up thinking and become the observer and realize we're nature running off, chemistry and conditioning, you got to give up this thing that's stimulating the cycles of thought. And that's all there is to do. When we realize that, TV goes away. When we get back in balance, the addictions go away because we're now getting back in balance, so we don't need to do the things we did because we're out of balance, right? And it's all part of presence and purification. There's nothing else to do besides do nothing. Stop thinking, just be. Be the observer. So I just wanted to jump into a little bit deeper into why we really watch television, scroll, stimulation, and things like that, right? We're out of balance. And remember, there's no one to judge and nothing to do because judgment assumes control. Sin assumes control, but there is no control. And we see this when we stop thinking and end all of our problems and become the observer. Have you ever stopped thinking long enough to become the observer, to realize we only think we're in control and we think we're somebody doing something? But we're the observer. We just are identifying with the actor. This is what causes us to get in the cycles of suffering. Because remember, stand in the center of the circle and allow all things to take their course. Be the observer. Don't become attached. Don't think. As soon as you start thinking, though, this is the highest perspective in the center of the circle, higher self, the divine working through you. As soon as you start thinking, that creates your suffering because that drags you into the illusion and you're attached. You're attached to your somebodyness. You think you're somebody doing something. You think you're in control. You think you're no. So that creates a lower limiting perspective as soon as we think. So that's where our suffering comes from. So everything we do, whatever, or not do, in a lack of a better term, is to facilitate presence. Because presence brings everything into balance. And the more we do that, the less we need or can stand things like junk food. When you purify enough. I've been going, my chemistry and conditioning, I've been observing. This is what's interesting. I've been observing. I don't judge myself for doing whatever now anymore because you're just the observer. You're not doing anything. You're observing your chemistry and your conditioning, your nature running off. You're like, oh, that's interesting. My body is doing this now. Oh, it's doing this. Oh, I thought I was done with that. We're doing this again. Oh, someone said, I said, all suffering assumes control. And someone said, well, what if you drop a brick on your foot? You're going to be suffering. You can observe pain in the body without being attached to it, without being attached to your suffering, without identifying with somebody who thinks they're doing something and they think that things are happening to you. You don't have to identify with that. If you're the observer, you observe the vessel suffering, but you are not attached to it. So this is the center of the circle. This is what happens when we start thinking. This causes all of our suffering. So that's the Sea of Stimulation. That's why TV and scrolling is so prevalent, because not everybody, a lot of us are out of balance. And it's not your fault. We're not judging anybody for doing anything. Because I know if you're the observer, you know people aren't doing anything. They're just nature running off, and you get less and less mad. You're like, well, that's just their nature running off. They're acting like an idiot. That's just their chemistry and their conditioning. They could not do anything else ever. They could not make any other decision. You could not make any other decision. Anything you've done in your past, you were never going to do anything different. And as it is merely your chemistry and your conditioning, your nature running off. You are not doing anything. We just think we're somebody doing something. And we think we're in control, which causes all of our suffering. Because we have anxiety about the future. We have stress. We're depressed about the past. Because we think we're in control. Because we're thinking, right? You get rid of control. Well, how do we get rid of control? You got to stop thinking. Right? To get rid of control, you become the observer. And you realize you're not doing anything. And that's how we let God work through us. That's how we have higher self, our cosmic beloved flowing through us. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. center of the circle, not thinking, right? We naturally release these bad habits or things we do to cope with being out of balance, and the need for these stimulating things. We naturally release these things when we come back in balance. Which is how? Presence and purification, right? I've noticed this as the more and more I purify my body on fruits, mainly fruits and a little bit of vegetables, raw, as best as I can, right? And I fall off from time to time. I'm not perfect on keeping this thing. I am merely observing that's my chemistry and condition. I'm not doing anything, right? That's why he's saying observe your bad habits. They're just like, that's interesting. But right, the more I purify, the less I can take any of these stimulating things, even cooked food or junk food or processed food, vegan. I've been vegan for I don't even know how long I've been vegan. I don't count that closely. It's like 12 years. I don't know, 10 to 12 years, 13 years. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But right? So, and now I eat raw foods. So when I eat vegan junk food, that's why I was explaining that. When I eat junk food, what I consider processed food or lots of cooked food, my body can't take it because that's part of the self-correcting process of purification, presence and purification. My body will automatically push me enough to make me have no choice but to go back to purification because the pain is too much and for my balance, right? And I get caught in the suffering. I said, I can't do this. I woke up the other day after having cooked food. So this is the deal, right? I've been all raw, mainly fruit for over 200 days. That was my recent streak. Then I fell off a little. Started eating some cooked food and some processed food, a little bit. Mostly fruit still. Even still mostly fruit. I gained 20 pounds for less than one cooked meal a day. I gained about, my average, I gained about 20 pounds in a little over a month. And my body started to crumble eating one cooked meal. My body started to crumble. My joints, my body was getting clean enough where the true effect of these foods became readily apparent very quickly. The reason most people don't have some of these issues is because their body is forced to adapt to eating wrong foods and to not be constantly in a crumble like I am. But my body is done with that. I woke up a few days ago before I started getting back on the fruits, more on the fruits and the raw, right, and getting away from the cooked food and the junk food again. And I almost couldn't get out of bed because my joints, my knees hurt so bad, my elbows, my hips, my back was all so sore. I felt terrible. 2 days back on the fruit, all my shit's almost completely better. My back is significantly better. My knees don't hurt anymore. My hip doesn't really hurt anymore. My elbow is way better. Just that little bit of change in diet. So imagine if I ate 2 cooked meals a day. But a lot of the symptoms are hidden because your body's accustomed to it. That doesn't mean it's not there. That's the tricky part. That's why people get caught up in changing their diet a lot of times. And part of the purification, which is one of the highest devotions to God, purifying the vessel because we are God. That's where we get caught up. So I got caught up there. And also we need to constantly, as conscious beings, constantly be shifting our perspectives to gain a deeper understanding in many different perspectives. That's another reason why we go through so many perspectives, like back and forth. We need to gain a deeper understanding so we can better teach and relate to everyone, right? So that happens, right? So my body couldn't take it anymore. That's what happens on purification. Your old bad habits and addictions, eventually you just can't take it anymore. Your being can't take it anymore, and you keep getting self-corrected. You keep getting kicked back as long as we're on presence and purification and we're focusing on that. So bad habits and addictions will fall away naturally. Presence and purification brings everything into balance. For drinking, I stopped drinking just because I purified enough, which wasn't even that much, but I've been just starting on the purification journey after a year or two, and drinking just fell away naturally, right? Same with the cooked food and junk food. I mean, yeah, you fall back once in a while when you're out of balance. Why do we seek stimulation? Cooked food, junk food, stimulation, because we're out of balance, right? And so I just had to get back in balance. So I focusing on doing the only thing we can do, which is nothing, which is presence, which is surrender. And things will start to slowly come back in balance, right? And we will align more deeply when we're in balance, when we can remove these acidic, stimulating foods and things like this, we become more in line. Easier to become present, easier to stop thinking when we don't have the acids aggravating us, right? Easier to stay present, and we allow the divine to flow through us. And we stop taking in information and empty the mind. I have a video called The Mind Bucket, Full Mind, Empty Mind, if you're interested in that concept. We need to empty the mind to allow space for deeper understanding, which helps us escape the illusion. Which helps us realize that the only thing there is to do is stay present and surrender to our cosmic beloved. That's it, which is doing nothing. That's the only thing there is to do. Because everything else is stimulating the cycles of thought and keeps us trapped in the illusion. And there's nothing to do. We're not doing anything. We just think we're in control. So we get stressed out, we get anxious, we get programmed, and then that's part of our conditioning, right? We act off our chemistry and conditioning. So a lot of our conditioning is from watching television, movies, shows, music, things like this. The news, that's a lot of our conditioning. Right? So when our chemistry is all messed up because we're conditioned to eat foods that create a self-limiting population and destroy our bodies, our conditioning reacts the only way it knows how. However it was conditioned, through mainly the television. We drink alcohol, we eat junk food, we self-abuse. All these things are forms of self-abuse. Anything that harms the vessel is really a form of self-abuse. But we're not in control, so it doesn't matter even labeling it or using labels. I'm just using words to best lay this picture out as I can, right? Because it's just our chemistry and conditioning. We can't do anything about it. That's why the only thing there is to do about this self-abuse and these bad habits is observe. And that will correct them. And you'll eventually drop them. Through purification and presence, bad habits will drop. The more you're in balance. And you will see how sensitive you can become to some forms of stimulation, and how quickly it brings you more out of balance, and how you need to get back in balance, which is what? Presence. Give it all up, which is easier said than done. That's another video. I think I've made a video on that before. The trouble with giving it all up. We're so attached to our somebodyness. Our ego is powerful. The ego will resist its own destruction. So it's going to be hard for the ego to let it go, to say, I let it all go. I don't need to think. That's the ego's biggest attachment. Nothing to do, my friends. Don't worry about the past. Don't worry about the future. You can only ever do one thing based off your chemistry and conditioning, your nature running off. Just observe it, no matter what. Remember, there is no bad habits, your addictions. We need to get back in balance. Remove the aggravators, remove the sea of stimulation, aggravation, and information as much as possible. Meditate, close the eyes, remove all your senses from the illusion, from the sea of stimulation as much as possible. And also meditating by practicing presence throughout the day in anything you're doing. Because we're not doing anything, right? This is the craziness about it. You're just your chemistry and conditioning, your nature running off. So just become the observer. Purify the body. Right? Get back to the center of the circle through presence so we can regain true common sense, so we can realize what the true diet is for humans. And through my own trial and error of my chemistry and my conditioning, going back and forth through the diet and feeling going forward on one way and then trying to go back and realizing this is the true effect of these foods if we were all numbed down, right? Your joints would hurt. Like right away. Your stomach, your back, because it's your kidneys if you're having too much protein, whatever. Your heart palpitations from cooked food and junk food, just a little bit. Because your body, this is your body. If your body's clean enough, this is how your body's going to react. It's going to be like, no, no, no. These are signs that say no, right? Your body's saying, no, don't eat that. Why would you eat that? Bing, bing. If you were completely cleaned out and then tried it, let's say we all started completely cleaned out. We could have one day where we felt completely cleaned out, and then we could try to eat whatever we want and see how our body reacted. Whew, that would be like, all right, then no, can't have that. Let's get at the fruit. The fruit is hydrating. It's the highest energy foods, right? This is what we need to purify the body. We need hydration because we're full of acids. Acids aggravate, which is why it's harder to stop thinking on these stimulating foods. So we're out of balance. So we eat this junk food like we're programmed to, and we become more out of balance because these foods are too stimulating, and the cycles of thought keep going, and we think we're somebody doing something. All right, it's been 20 minutes. I still got to get sleep. Sleep is very important. In my last video, I talked about how important sleep was. Maybe I'll make a separate video on sleep because it impacts purification and it impacts presence. Purification and presence become much harder when we don't get proper sleep. This is a very big issue I've dealt with myself. And noticing, observing the effects of when we don't prioritize sleep all the time. And the thing is, diet can affect your sleep, which I've noticed too from eating when I eat the wrong foods. My sleep will get into terrible, and I'll be just deathly exhausted during the day, and I'll be like, I cannot do this. I cannot keep eating this food. My body feels like it's shutting down. So I go back to the fruit. I feel fine 2 days later. My joints feel better. I have more energy. My sleep is already improving because I'm making sure I hydrate. We need a lot of hydration because we're full of so many acids from a lifetime of abuse and pumping ourselves full of acids. So you might need more than you think. I know I do. I could drink 3 or 4 liters of juice and water a day, 5 or 6 liters, and eat a bunch of watermelons, still be feel like I'm dehydrated. Because that's how full of acids we are. But that'll help us. So sleep will help us eat better, because when we have a lack of sleep, we seek stimulation. And also, that's another reason we seek these stimulations, is because when we're tired, we seek stimulation in food and coffee and drugs and whatever. Television and scrolling, we just need some sort of stimulation because it makes us easier to be out of balance. So sleep is so important. So let's do everything we can to facilitate good sleep so our presence and purification become easier, right? Thank you for joining me, my friends. May our cosmic beloved grant us peace, patience, presence, and understanding. If you have any questions about anything I mentioned in this video, any concepts or perspectives, I have many videos on all these subjects. Please check out my YouTube, and also it's on my TikTok. Not so much on my Instagram and Facebook. I don't post too many videos there anymore, sometimes pictures. But again, I'm trying to get away from all these screens. You'll realize eventually we don't need screens. Obviously, we're both using screens now, but for the most part, we can let the screens go and just be without technology. Just be present. We don't need, everything will happen whether or not we throw our phone in a lake and never use it again, or we use it every day. Everything will happen in divine timing perfectly. It doesn't matter either way. We were always going to do it based off our chemistry and conditioning, and it doesn't matter either way because it was always going to happen. And as long as we are in presence of purification, everything will happen in perfect divine time. Because we'll be allowing, when we surrender, we're allowing God to flow through us, a higher self. I am God's eternal love pouring forth. Namaste.